as the UN-mandated peacekeeping force. Well, again, the fact that Macedonia was a partner meant that it was able to assist us by allowing us to put forces on its territory, but we assisted it, because there was this massive outpouring of Kosovar Albanian refugees, nearly 1 million of them back in 1999, which put immense strain on the Macedonian health system, the social services. The NATO military had to build camps, or reception camps and facilities, and of course make sure they went home as quickly as possible once the war came to an end. So partnership has definitely benefited NATO by giving us a network of countries that normally can be relied upon to share their part of the burden when crisis comes calling. And of course today, those burden-sharing operations are at the stage where, if you look at Afghanistan, Australia is the 10th largest contributor. I don't mean the 10th largest contributor of the partners. I mean the 10th largest contributor of all the contributors, including NATO countries. In fact, an irony is that partners sometimes put more soldiers in these missions than some NATO countries do. And in the case of Australia, in Afghanistan today, soldiers that are in the front line, in the south, Kandahar, Helmand, together with the Dutch, involved in counter-insurgency operations as well as reconstruction. Indeed, NATO's missions today, nearly 15% of all of the forces are from partner countries. And indeed, Kosovo, 13 partners. If you look at today, Afghanistan, 11 non-NATO countries are there. It's good for political legitimacy, as well as practical burden sharing. Obviously, it'd be much more difficult for NATO to conduct these operations without the partners. Even those countries that are not directly involved militarily, like Japan, through the partnership, are willing to cough up, as we say in good Cockney English, to contribute sizable sums of money to the humanitarian reconstruction programs through NATO and through NATO's provincial reconstruction teams. So contributions can be financial as well as military. Other countries, like the Central Asian countries, don't have forces in Afghanistan, but we would be hard put, frankly, to conduct that mission if they did not offer transit, if they did not offer bases, if we couldn't share intelligence with them, or if they weren't prepared to help with some of the counter-narcotics activities or control the borders. So you will find that partners are increasingly involved in the practical work. What used to be a sort of rather a one-way relationship, to paraphrase John F. Kennedy, do not ask what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. What used to be a one-way relationship of basically NATO transmitting savoir-faire to others has increasingly become a two-way relationship as partners also contribute to us. And countries like Sweden and Finland, with quite major UN peacekeeping experience, obviously have as much to teach us as we have to teach them. And so partnership now is creeping into other areas as well, managing disasters together, setting up trust funds to destroy small arms and munition or even outdated missiles in Ukraine, training and education activities as well. So this has led one of my colleagues, a German analyst called Karl-Heinz Kamp, to actually describe this as the partnership industry. And in many respects, he's correct. There has been a globalization of this, and even where countries have not become formal partners of NATO, such as China or Afghanistan, or some years ago Serbia and Bosnia, NATO has still found it rather convenient to have partnership cooperation programs. So in other words, you don't even need to be a formal partner of NATO now to be the recipient of a practical cooperation program. As in the case of Afghanistan, where there is a mutual interest in carrying out military training and security sector reform. And this arrangement is now even being transferred to other international organisations, such as the African Union, which is using similar mechanisms for NATO to assist in the creation of the African Union standby peacekeeping force. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all know success is better than failure, right? Right. But that does not mean that success does not also bring its share of problems and challenges as we look to the future. So now, let me focus briefly on what I see the challenges that have emerged from this success story so far. The first one, of course, is too many cooks spoil the broth. The EAPC, the original institution, the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, which, as I say, brings 55 countries around the table, in many respects is the victim of its own success. It's too big. It's now bringing together countries from different geographical regions with different security interests and priorities, finding the common denominator. You know, if you talk about everything, you talk about nothing. Finding that common denominator that makes it worthwhile for everybody is difficult. Do you want to fly 5,000 miles to Brussels only to be able to speak for 2 or 3 minutes? Because everyone has to have their lick at the lollipop, as we say in good Cockney English, and have their 2 or 3 minutes speaking time. Well, of course, no, it's not easy. When you have so many people around the table, inevitably the meetings have a somewhat ritualistic character. So one of the first challenges that we face is not getting rid of the EAPC, keeping the sort of umbrella, but increasingly conducting the business among sort of self-selecting smaller groups. These can be regional groups. For example, the Central Asians get together with NATO to discuss Afghanistan. Makes sense, you know, they're the neighbours, they've got an interest, there are things to discuss. The Balkan countries have formed a group called C Group, C standing not for Ocean Sea, but Southeastern Europe Group, which discusses Balkan regional issues. We had in the past groups that you may have heard of, like Visegrad or Vilnius, which were the groups of countries in Eastern Europe that were working together to prepare for NATO membership. Or these groups can be functional groups, not necessarily geographical, but, you know, the friends of a certain project, like demining or whatever, who have an interest or cyber defence or whatever, and find that they can use the partnership mechanisms to come together to discuss cooperation in those areas. So I think that within the EAPC, this idea of a rather informal network of groups that have a common interest and come together is the way ahead. I mean, those of you who do the European Union will obviously know that it's exactly the same problem with the same approach. You've all heard of sort of reinforced cooperation groups, which are part of the Lisbon Treaty, by the way. Of course, in the EU, that's a more formalised thing. In NATO, it's much more informal, but that clearly is one of the ways ahead. The second problem that has come up is that the blurring of the distinction between allies and partners. As we've done more together, so we've become more alike. I was at the NATO summit in Bucharest a few weeks ago, and we had a meeting with the partners